No one gets married to get divorced. No one gets divorced for positive reasons. And children don't get to make the decision whether their parents get divorced, but their lives are significantly impacted by this decision. We all desire a good divorce, a divorce without conflict, a divorce that minimizes its impact, and a divorce where we can move forward. So, how do we do it? Today's guest is going to help us answer that exact question. Welcome to the Crazy Ex-Wives Club, a podcast dedicated to helping women navigate the emotional journey that is divorce. I'm your host, Erica, and if you're trying to figure out life after the big D, welcome to the club. Whether you're contemplating divorce or dealing with the aftermath or any of the many phases in between, the club has got you covered. Each week, you'll hear stories from women who have been in your shoes. This isn't about spilling tea on divorce details. This is about giving you the tools to take control of your own healing journey. Listen in weekly for advice, tips, and tools to help you move through each stage of the process. Welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Ex-Wives Club. I'm your host, Erica, and I am excited to introduce today's guest. Sarah Armstrong is the author of The Art of the Juggling Act, Bite-Sized Guide for Working Parents, and The Mom's Guide to a Good Divorce, which is what we're going to explore today. So welcome, Sarah. Happy to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Erica. Great to be here with you.
Yeah. So now, Sarah, your divorce was a while ago because in your bio, it also talks about you are a proud mom of Grace who just graduated from college. And in the book, we hear about Grace when she's about 7. So you have walked the path, you have come out on the other side, and you have had a lot of learnings along the way.
Definitely have. Yes, Grace was 7 when we went through the change of this big life change. And yes, she
Yeah.
just graduated. So it's been a journey, but I think that's one of the interesting things is what you do learn along the way and how important it is to be able to reflect on those learnings. And what I've done, Erica, with this book and why I'm spending time with you today, this is my giving back. I think there's a lot that we can share with each other to help those that think maybe a good divorce isn't possible, explain why we really think it could be if you approach it in a certain way.
Yeah. So you guys, we're talking about The Mom's Guide to a Good Divorce. This is a book Sarah wrote and has updated and kept it current. I loved this book because it takes you through a guide on how to process the steps of the divorce. We talk a lot about there's so many different pieces and everything's moving in different directions. And so it is so simple and straightforward and clear and broken out in these beautiful little chapters, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But first, tell us a little bit about kind of why you were motivated to write this specific book. Like what really moved you? Because you talk a lot about, your friends in the book, like in kind of bringing in all of this network of experience of divorce.
Yeah. So the way it played out is I was the first of my friends to get divorced. Okay. And actually, in fairness, Grace at age 7 was the first of her little friend group to have parents that got divorced. So I went through the process. And after we went through the process, I had a number of friends that came to me. And I should start by saying, Erica, I'm not an advocate for divorce. I think couples should, if they can stay married happily for the long term, that is absolutely the goal. And as you said at the beginning, no one gets married to get divorced. But if it can't work out, then I think there's a way to do it. And so for our journey, I went through it a certain way with my ex-husband. And we'll talk a bit about that. But my friends would come to me and they'd say, would you help me think through this? And I'd say, sure. And I go, well, but why? And they're like, well, you've had such a good divorce. And I was like, interesting. Okay. So I would sit down with them and kind of take them through the steps that we went through. And at the end of each of these, there were really 4 very close girlfriends over the course of a couple of years. And they all had arrived on their own decision to get divorced. And it was at that point that we were kind of having these conversations. After I'd sit down with them at the end of these discussions, they'd say, you should really write all this stuff down. And I'd look at them and I'd say, I'm in the corporate world. I do global marketing. I'm not a writer. and I'd say, yeah, I'd say maybe someday in a very passing, yeah, maybe someday. Well, I was at a business dinner in Mexico City about a couple of years after my divorce. And a colleague and friend of mine turned to me at dinner and he said, Sarah, you're so happy. And I said, yeah, I am. He goes, but you're divorced. And I looked at him, I said, Salman, getting divorced is not a death sentence. I said, yeah, I'm happy. My ex-husband's happy. Grace is happy. I go, we're all happy. And yes, we are in a divorce situation, but just because you get divorced doesn't mean you can't be happy. And I mentioned to him that a number of my friends were wanting me to write a book and put kind of my thoughts down. And he goes, "You really should." So the next morning, I got on the plane out of Mexico City back to Atlanta, where I was living at the time. And I opened my personal laptop and I wrote the line that says, "This book is written by a girl who never ever thought she would get a divorce, who got a divorce, and what she learned along the way." And then I wrote about, gosh, almost 80 to 90% of it on Delta because I traveled globally for my job. But then, Erica, things got busy and it was and I opened it up one day on a flight to California and I looked at it and said, "Are you going to be a file on my laptop or are you going to do something with this?" And so that's when I decided to publish it and put it out in the world. And the title, actually, and the concept, my friends had mentioned Good Divorce, but Grace was really the one that coined the term for me. And the story really still sits with me. But we were in a CVS one day. She was 8 years old. It was a year after our divorce. And there was a People magazine on the newsstand right by the checkout. And there was a celebrity couple getting a divorce. And she goes, "Mommy, is that a good divorce or a bad divorce?" I said, "Grace, I don't know. What's the difference between a good divorce and a bad divorce?" She goes, "A good divorce is when the mommy and daddy are nice to each other like you and daddy, and a bad divorce is when they scream and yell at each other."
Yeah. You can't, I mean, kids are so brilliant in how they approach things. And it
Yeah,
was actually those two pieces that you just shared from the book.
yeah,
You know, your manager had sent it over and I had
yeah,
started reading and I got to that line and I was like, I'm sold. Like, bought
yeah,
the book on Audible, dove all the way in. I was like, this is what we need
yeah,
because divorce doesn't have to be this death sentence. It doesn't have to be this, you're forever going to be dealing with it and it's forever going to be difficult and it forever hangs over your head. Even though on all of our medical forms, they ask us if we're divorced, like why that is on there, who knows? Someday maybe it'll change. But yeah, like being able to look at our kids, we have the responsibility as parents to handle this like adults and not like kids. And I think that's where in your book, you know, you talked about it's similar to managing a project and like fellow former corporate employee for me. Like I was like, yeah, it is because it's all these moving pieces and you have to be able to remove the emotion and figure out the business, but then you have to deal with the emotion that's in there too. And it just feels so overwhelming and complicated until you lay it out very clearly.
yeah. And it's interesting because what you said really struck me. When a couple goes through a divorce and children involved, the stakes are high, and we owe it to our children to ensure that they're not collateral damage due to
Mhm.
this divorce. And I always say, even though couples have decided to no longer be married to one another, that's fine.
Yeah.
We made a commitment to our kids when we bring them into this world
Yeah.
that we're going to bring them up in the healthiest environment possible. I mean, I joke that we cover the plugs, we put bike helmets on them, we feed them organic milk, we do all these things that are
Yeah.
meant to make sure they're safe, healthy, and happy. But then the toxicity that can come from a divorce situation can
Yeah.
have long-term impact on our children's approach to relationships, their view on marriage, and
Yeah.
actually their overall happiness in life. And so I think it's our responsibility, true responsibility as parents, to take how we're approaching this divorce
Mhm.
very seriously. And co-parenting in a divorce situation is the most important thing you can do well. And that is what I really have such passion for because we do have control, and I say control in air quotes, for our own actions as individuals. And ideally, if both individuals have the right focus, which is your children and what's best for them, then you can end up in a better place.
Yeah. It takes a little time, but it takes
It
focus. It
it
takes
does.
conscious choice of like, I'm not gonna step into the petty behavior. It doesn't feel good on the short term to send that zinger. Yeah, does it help you move towards where you're going? No.
No, no. And I talk a lot about, or one of the topics I talk about in the book is taking the high road. And the high road can be really steep. It can be a mountain. That high road can be on a mountain. But the thing is, I've said over the many years, I've never regretted taking the high road at every turn because I always had Grace in mind and like what's best for her, what's best for her. And generally taking the high road was best for her. And so that was the road I took, even though it was steep at times. And so I think you just have to kind of keep grounded in that as part of the mindset. It comes with a lot of, to your point, there's a lot of both mental and emotional. The roller coaster you're on during a divorce is significant.
Whew.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's what all you
crazy.
can
Yeah.
say is like,
Oh
"Whew,
yeah, exactly.
I love it."
And but one thing you said is really true. Like I think some people, when you're in it, you can't see that you'll get out of this phase and that life after this can be happy. It is a
Yeah,
new normal. It's not the same life and all of
no,
those things. And I think one of our challenges, and I this is one of the reasons I feel so strongly about talking to you and others about this topic, is society as a whole, the societal perception of divorce is that obviously it's a negative thing, but then I don't think there's enough conversation about how to have a good divorce and how do we actually change the social norm that if 50% of marriages are going to end in divorce, that why can't they be good? And when I wrote this book and I titled it this way, I've had a lot of skeptics that look at me and they go, good divorce, really? And some people say, I know one other couple that has a divorce like you've had. And I look at them and I say, wouldn't it be great if most couples that went through a divorce had this type of divorce? Because if we're going to go through it, why don't we do it well? Why don't we actually end up in a pot? You get divorced to be in a better situation. Why would you get divorced to say, oh, I'm going to continue to be in this negative space in my life? And carry, and you said it, carry the scarlet letter of society saying you're divorced. I mean, Erica, you said it earlier. Why do I, when I go to get my teeth cleaned, why does the dentist need to know I'm divorced? I'm just like, why? I have no, I just want my teeth cleaned. I want them white, so I don't understand that. And but it's the label that we're given. Divorce is an action. You get divorced. It does not need to be this negative cloud that follows you through your whole life.
no, and that's really, the crazy ex-wives club. We're not crazy. We got big emotions. Our whole world is being turned upside down. And if we don't learn how to take care of ourselves from an emotional standpoint, how to heal those places, how to choose the high road, then guess what? They drive what we do. And we do seem a little crazy, right? We need to be in control of how we're choosing to move forward through this big life change. And I'm the same with you. I'm very pro marriage. I'm like, I would love to help you fix it. Like, I will do way more. Let's really get to it, even in the 11th hour, and fix the pieces that are in there. And divorce was still the right option for us. It was still the path that my family had to go through. And I wouldn't change that. But yeah, it is like helping as many people navigate it with as little damage as possible. Very important. So, you guys, if you're looking at her book, so I loved, again, I'm just going to say, I was really excited to see. I think on Audible, it was somewhere around 3 or 4 hours. I was really excited to see it. I'm like, oh my God, it's not like 12, right? You get those Audible books and you're like, who's got 12 hours to deal with this? And then I love that the chapters we're so clear. Again, managing a project, you guys. Like, we're looking at the decision, where to start. Mindset is essential. Understand your finances, prepare your budget, determine your approach to divorce, define what you want your life to look like, think through the trade offs, right? It gives you all these pieces along the way in bite size amounts because you're already overwhelmed. So there's no point in, hey, let's throw all of it at you. And that's where one of the other things you said is you and your friends, as they navigated this, you're only ready for what you're ready for. And you're only ready for one step at a time. And so we could sit here and we could tell you, oh my gosh, all this stuff happens. Or we sit here and say, life does get really good on the other side if you do the work. You can't see that because you are like 1,000 steps this way. And so having this little easy tutorial that walks you through and gets you thinking. And so I think the first topic that I wanted us to jump into was making that decision. Because what you had wrote, it's what I've talked about too, and what people say, like, how do I know I've done everything before I make the decision to get divorced? And it's why I stayed. I mean, we were 2 years separated. I mean, years of unhappy, okay? But 2 years of an active separation where I knew there was another woman in it. And I still was not ready to be like, I've done everything. Like, I wanted to really know that I had done everything possible.
It's so important. And on that topic, the question I ask myself is down the road, could I look at Grace and say, I did all I could? That dad
Mhm.
and I did all we could to stay in the same house and raise you together. And that just didn't work out. And now we're going to do it this way. And so that was the question I had to be able to answer for myself. And I think everyone will have a different time frame of when they potentially get to the answer, if they get to that answer in that conversation with yourself.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think that's really the fundamental point that you have to ask and feel
Mm.
comfortable that when you say, yeah, I'm okay, then you're ready to do it. And I've heard the analogy of sitting on an egg and like when you're ready for everyone to see the cracks in the egg, like the egg has cracked and it's not the glossy, shiny picture of what you might think life looks like, then it's probably time to go.
Yeah. And that's really the hardest part because when you're in that uncertain phase, your mind is kinda all messed up. It is way in fight or flight. You can't really come to the rational conclusions you want to. Your nervous system is haywire. It's sending all these weird random signals. So the one thing you don't wanna hear is for us divorced women to be like, "You'll know when you know." But the reality is that it's a heart approach. It's not all the external validation and opinions that you get, because everybody's got opinions, but it is like sitting in your heart and saying, "Have I done all I can do?" I can't control my partner. I can't control what they choose to do or not do. But can I sit there and be proud in front of my kids and say, "I gave it my all." And then there gets to be that day where you're finally like, "I'm choosing me over continuing to sacrifice myself for something that the other person is not working on."
And I think at that point, and when you make that choice, that's where, again, because we talk about because we don't get married to get divorced, we don't grow up saying, okay, so when I get divorced, this is how I'm going to do it. Right. It's not when you're a little girl and you think about your wedding or think about how you want to maybe manage your career or all these other life choices you're going to make or life. When you get divorced, it's not this thing you've planned for. And that's where it becomes this overwhelming, like literally tsunami of things all at once. And to your point, the emotion, the actions you have to, it's all these decisions you have to make. And so that's why with the approach, and you mentioned it, I took everything down to bite-sized pieces. By the way, this book is not meant to be read cover to cover. It's meant to be there as your guide along the way and just take the piece that you need to think through and just take that one and they're all just a paragraph or a page because it's too much. There's so much. And so you really have to break it down so that that overwhelming feeling of almost paralysis, I don't know where to go, so I'm not going to do anything. Because once you've made the decision, then you're like, okay, how do we tackle this? How do we take it in those bite-sized pieces and go down the path that you now have decided you want to go down?
Yeah, and that's so true. It's literally like, you're opening and you're scared to acknowledge. I did not wanna acknowledge that divorce was actually the answer. I didn't wanna acknowledge any of the facts that my body knew. Like, I knew something had been wrong for a very long time. But then you get one chapter at a time and you read it, and then you can think on it, and you can reflect on it, and you can digest it, and when you're all of a sudden like, okay, what would the next thing be that I need to look at if this is the path I'm gonna walk down? And you can then move forward because you also said that. You said you wanna walk away from the divorce or marriage, not run. Calm, conscious choice is how you wanna move through that divorce.
Absolutely. And that's why the first phase I talk about is preparing for the change. This is one of the biggest changes you're going to go through and your children are going to go through in their lifetime. And it's what does that change look like? So there's preparing for the change, there's during the change, like when you're in it, like really in the depths of all those tough decisions. You have to start talking. I mean, Grace was 7. We had to start talking about things like, well, in 11 years when she goes to college, are we going to pay? Like, how are we funding it? We were looking so far out on certain decisions, and like, but you to do it well and to do a parenting plan well, which is one of the things we talk about in the book, you really have to think in the future in places that because if you don't do it, then the debates down the road could be much harder. And then the third phase is post the change, like that next, to your point, that next phase of life where you turn the corner, like, okay, this is my new normal. What does this look like? And how do I make it the best life it's meant to be?
If you're feeling overwhelmed, exhausted from overthinking, and stuck in uncertainty, this message is for you. You don't have to keep feeling that way. Inside the club, you'll find a safe space to rediscover who you are, clarify what you want, and determine how you want to move forward. Surrounded by women who truly understand and guided by expert support, you are not alone on this journey. Join us at thecrazyexwivesclub.com/the club. It's time to reclaim your life. And one of the other things I really like too is you had separate chapters for stay-at-home moms and working women and how you're gonna move forward. And I think no matter what your quote unquote job is, whether you're working in the home or whether you are working for somebody else, you talked about the journey of becoming self-sufficient. And I was like, "Oh, hot damn." I like hit pause. I had to like type that one out, right? Because it doesn't matter what type of work you do. Divorce is a journey of becoming self-sufficient. I hear so many people be like, well, what do you mean I can't just text him? Or I was talking to somebody the other day and we were over a year divorced and I got a call because she ran out of gas and she expected me to come rescue her. She was over an hour away from me. And she's like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean you're not coming? No, like this is one of the things that you do need to really start thinking through is that like, how am I going to become self-sufficient? How am I going to take care of myself? And what do I want that to look like? Do I want to live off the alimony? Do I want to go back to work? The job you have, is it going to be enough to pay for your life without a second salary from your partner? Or what do you need to be able to move forward?
Absolutely. And I think the self-sufficiency on both sides, whether you're a stay-at-home mom or working mom, it's going to look slightly different in terms of some of those factors. And I share a story because it was my reality is my husband and I, or ex-husband and I, had divvied up the household responsibilities and things. So he did all the finances and I did other things. Well, I literally had never done online banking. I mean, I had never paid bills that way. I mean, I had to sit down, okay, and it's not hard, but I just had never done it. And it's the things that, because you've divvied it up over years, and we were together, married for 12, but together for 17 years. So we had a long life of kind of divvying things up. And, so there's just things that you have to stop and say, what don't I know how to do? Or what do I need to figure out for myself? And can I do it myself, or do I need to find someone who can do that for me or help me with whatever the thing is, and figure out what that support network is that you need in place? Because it really is, you can't do it alone. I think that's the other thing is sometimes you can feel so alone in this moment, and you need to figure out who's going to be there for you, whether it's things around the house, whether it's, a backup if you can't make picking up your child after school or after an activity, whatever that thing is, really figuring out who's that person you can call in the moment and say, I need help. You'll laugh at this, but before Grace was old enough, I work for a tech company now, but I was not very technical back in the day, and I needed tech support. My ex-husband wasn't there anymore. So I had one of my neighborhood friend's sons was 16, and Parker came over and he's my tech support. I needed it. And because Grace wasn't old enough at the time, she then became my tech support. But it's one of those things, but it's just the things that you have to figure out.
It's so funny because I was just having a conversation with a friend and we were talking about cars. Okay. This is one of
Yeah.
those self-sufficiency things.
So,
And so I always grew up, my dad was into fixing cars. So I was
Mhm.
always into fixing cars. In college, I was in like a Volkswagen, vintage Volkswagen group,
I
and I
love
worked
it.
on my own cars. So like this was very familiar for me. And I understand that's not typical
Uh-huh.
for most
Uh-huh.
women. And so she was looking at the fact that her car needed an oil change.
Mhm.
And she's like, but where do I go?
Mhm.
Right. These are the levels of self sufficiency. And I was like, well, call the dealership, get what their price is, call the
Mhm.
next regular
Mhm.
place, see what their price is.
Mhm.
Could you do it on your own? For sure. I mean, now it's kind of a pain in the butt.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what we talked about is I was like, I looked at what can I do? What do I want to do? And then how does my money support me in outsourcing the things
Absolutely.
that I don't want to? So, like when I left the house that we had together and I moved into a townhouse,
Mhm.
I found myself an amazing handyman who I loved. And I would call him and I had ordered shelves for my
Yeah.
garage and they sat in my garage for a year. Can I hang the
Mhm.
shelves? For sure. And then
Mhm.
finally I was like, can you just come over?
Yes.
Want 2 hours. Just
Yes.
please come hang the shelves and they'll be done.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
you look at that support system, like it's not only people, but it's how we use our money to support us to get the things done. Like
Absolutely.
I'd call the neighbor's husband. I'd text her and I'd be like, I need to borrow your husband. This is a dial a husband moment.
Oh,
I
no.
cannot, I'm trying to install a new sink and the
Mhm.
hole is not quite big enough and I need a hacksaw and I don't know, I don't have it. Or I had to get a washer and dryer down from a second story. And I was like, I need a
No,
husband, send him over. And
I
so
had,
the ladies would laugh and
well,
somebody will come help you.
absolutely, I would say my annual thing was taking the Christmas tree out of the house.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure that. So it could be delivered, but who's going to help me take it out of the house? So those, and every year
Yeah.
I had a wonderful, amazing neighbor, husband, friend who he
Yeah.
and his son would come over and we'd do it together.
Yeah.
But it became an annual tradition of that.
It's a beautiful thing, you guys. In the moment, sometimes you're a little like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Like
Mhm.
arriving home on a Friday night to find that my water heater overheated and flooded my first floor. And it's me and a 5-year-old. And I'm crying on the floor because I can't figure out what the heck I'm going to do in this new bill. And I just
Mhm.
moved in and all the things, right?
Mhm.
Self sufficiency,
Yes.
emotional resiliency, too.
Yes.
These things
Yes.
come up.
They do.
And then you learn how to get through them.
You do.
And you get to decide, am I relying on me? Am I asking for help? Am I outsourcing it to somebody else? And it's just really empowering.
Yeah. And I think the independence that you eventually feel and the pride you feel in yourself that you can kind of handle it all. I mean, it all in
Yeah.
air quotes because it's with support. I think
Yes.
is part of the post-divorce phase is an underappreciated aspect of feeling
Yeah.
like you can do this, you know.
Yeah. And then for me, I was very much hyper independent.
Mhm.
And so that was a lesson I had to learn too. I had to
Mhm.
learn that it was okay to call the neighbor and be like, "Hey, can you come help me?
Yeah.
I just need a," and I would feel so guilty. Oh my God, I would feel so guilty. And then I had to get
Yeah.
over it because I had
Yeah.
to allow people to show up in the way that they were willing to show up and help me.
Absolutely.
But they didn't
Absolutely.
know that I needed help unless I was willing to ask.
Well, and that's the thing. And people want to give you your space. They don't want to assume that you need help. So you do have to be willing to ask and to acknowledge it. And in fairness, when you find those people, it's a little bit of a balancing act of do you distribute that? Do you distribute that and ask for help?
Yes, I used to bake a lot of treats and drop those back off and be like, "I really appreciate this. Here you go." It'd be cinnamon rolls and it'd be cakes and whatever it was. And I just wanna acknowledge too that sometimes it feels like you really don't have anybody. Like, I really felt like I didn't have anybody. All our friends were through my, now ex-husband. We didn't have any family in town. I moved to a completely new city. I didn't know anybody, like, new school district, everything was new. And so there were times when I felt really alone, and there were times when the struggle was hard because maybe the friends and family couldn't really support me in the way I needed because they have their own opinion. And that's where, like, put yourself in the room with the people who are helping you rise, the people who are aligned with what that vision is. And we can still love our family for having their own opinions and our friends for having their own. That's their story. So that's where, like the club, you guys, the online group for the crazy ex wives, that's what we want to do. We're holding you in the right direction because I get it. We don't always have it. And sometimes we just need somebody to hold us up until we can get our feet underneath us and figure out who that new support system is.
Absolutely. And I talk a little bit in the book about energy givers versus energy takers, right?
Yes, let's talk a little
And
bit about that.
yeah, and I just think it's, in life, and Grace and I have talked about this over the course of her life in friendships and relationships. It's fill your circle with those people that are going to give you energy, whatever stage of life you're in, whatever situation you're going through. Those energy takers, I personally kind of have a tissue rejection to energy takers. It's just they're not individuals I want to spend time with because I'm a positive person by nature and I like to be around those that are going to build positive energy in your environment, not take it out. So I just think in divorce specifically, because it is viewed as such a negative thing and it is a very hard thing to go through, I think you need to really think about who you bring into your inner circle as you're going through divorce, what you're sharing, by the way, and how much you're sharing. And because also keeping everyone apprised to every little detail of what's going on is exhausting. And so really be selective on who you want to go on the step-by-step journey with you that is a divorce versus those that you say, I'm good, I'll keep you updated when we're done, because there's a lot. But I do think making sure that support network is in the energy giving category is for like,
Yeah, and you'll know the energy takers because they might seem positive. They don't all seem like they're just angry and bitchy and complaining. They may be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so concerned about you." But what they really want is for you to spill the tea. What they really want is the drama details. And you'll know because after you hang out with them, you're either going to feel better or you're going to feel worse, like exhausted, drained. Just be on the lookout for that. And when you start to find the ones that you're like, "Huh, this no longer serves me." This is taking energy from me, and your energy, you guys, it is your most valuable resource right now while navigating divorce because you need to be able to have all the energy needed to show up as a parent, to do your job, to figure out these answers, and to take care of yourself. And just start to gently create a little space.
yeah,
Take some of that back.
absolutely. I talk about it being especially the first year after divorce, Erica. There's two things that happen. One is you prepare for that year first, but I also talk about recovering from a divorce hangover and the fact that you literally feel like you're in this fog and you just have to, and I say that, and you still have to drive carpool every morning, right? You still have to get up and you're like, oh, how am I still doing this? But I think taking it day to day and knowing it will get better, but really focusing on the things that you can control, the things you want to put in place, the new traditions you might want to do with your kids, the new memories you want to create. It's about looking ahead, not looking back. I think that's one of the things that I feel now, my divorce was 15 years ago. But I can tell you that I have friends in my circle that have gotten divorced and they've moved on and they're living amazing, happy lives. And I do have friends that will still lament things from 15 years ago. And I'm thinking, why is it even a topic of conversation at this point? Really, I mean, we are so far past those moments and you have moved on. And so I think that's another thing, especially when your kids are in earshot. By the way, preparing during and post the divorce, this is one of my big things, is your kids see and hear everything, even if you don't think they do. They're tuned in and they notice everything. They notice everything. And one of my moments with Grace that I still to this day blows me away is we had decided I was keeping the house and my ex-husband was moving out. And when we went to kind of divvy things up, there was a hallway of family photos that were his family and my family, these black and white photos. And I had an afternoon where I had put together new photos and new frames, and I was going to put them on the wall. So I sent Grace down the street for a play date, and I put them all up and put the photos I was going to give to him in a box. And an hour later, she comes home, and I'm in the kitchen. I hear this little voice from the hallway that says, "Hey, Mom." I'm like, "What's that, Grace?" She goes, "The wall has changed." And I stop in my tracks. I go, "Well, what's changed?" She goes, "There are more pictures of me up there. It looks great." And she ran up to her room. And Erica, I had stopped in my tracks because I thought, oh my God. Now, what I can tell you is if I hadn't taken the effort to pull together some photos and put them on the wall, and if I had just left those little hangers for where the photos weren't in that hallway, what Grace would be telling a therapist years from now is that my parents got divorced and my mom took all the photos of my dad off the wall and she left those little hangers.
Yeah, because that's a perfect example of the subtle shift of dealing with the past that's done or focusing on the future. So
Yeah.
how do we fill the space that used to be filled with that family, that person, that whatever? How do we fill that space with new things that bring you joy? And when we bring it back into, okay, how
Absolutely.
do I, yes, there is a gap. Yes, there
Yes.
is a gap in like, I don't have a person, one of my big concerns, I don't have a
Yeah.
person to go to a concert with. Who's ever going to like the same music? Who's going to
Yeah.
go?
Yeah.
And instead of seeing the loss, seeing the I'm alone, the whatever,
Mhm.
instead it was
Mhm.
like, okay, how can I do this differently?
Mhm.
I went by myself. I did, then
Mhm.
COVID hit and we had virtual concerts and we
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
watch it online. And
Yeah.
like how you choose to fill the empty, quote unquote, empty space
Mhm.
that
Yep.
divorce is creating
Yeah.
is that proactive approach of no,
Yeah.
what do I want?
To
What do
be
I want in my life now? And
Yeah.
how do I want to move forward?
Yeah, and that's so important, especially as you think about, and I mean, one of the biggest challenges, obviously, is for most situations, there's going to be times when your kids aren't around because you're sharing custody, and you're going to have this quote unquote free time that you're lamenting that you're not with them. But I've always said, if you will eventually, and I say this to my more newly divorced friends, you'll eventually see that time as a gift. Right now, you're sad, you're missing them, but eventually you'll say, what are you going to do with that gifted time for you? And I think that when that switch gets flipped, that's one of those moments where you see, okay, my kids are with their father or their parent, and I'm going to do something for me. And that can be a really happy phase of life if you understand and embrace that for what it is. And I think, but it takes time. It takes time to kind of switch over, make that switch and mentally and emotionally understand the positive side of that situation versus my kids aren't with me, which is the negative emotional side that people can continue to anchor on.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's because as moms, we give everything to becoming a
Yes.
mom. Like I
Yes.
was like, who am I outside of the mom role? When my kid's at his dad's, who am I? Who do I want to be? What do I want to eat? What do I want to make for dinner? Like this whole new world of freedom showed up. And at first it was really painful. And then it became, okay, this is my time to clean the house and to go through stuff that I knew I wanted to sort or to go on a hike, go for a walk, go to the gym. Then I became so addicted to that time. And then so I often think about like my siblings that are not divorced and I'm like, I always get a parenting break where I can recharge and sleep in. And I was like, you don't get a parenting break. So there are some silver linings, you guys. When you get over the like, do I want to choose to see this as a painful thing or do I want to see the opportunity in this?
You make me smile because I had someone tell me that I made divorce look too good. And I laughed out loud and literally said, I'm just trying to live a happy, fulfilling life. And if I make divorce look too good because of that, then
Yeah.
so be it, but
Right?
that's, yeah, I'm just
It
like,
is. Yeah, it's so
yeah.
funny. I had a friend too,
Mhm.
she's, "I just wish I had your life." And I'm like, "Wait a second. My life of, like,
Mhm.
massive grief and heartache
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
separation and fighting
Mhm.
for my
Mhm.
marriage." And I go, "But yeah, I took a trip because I had a child-free weekend and I needed to find something to
Mhm.
bring more joy into my
Mhm.
life." I go, "I'm so
Absolutely.
aggressive about chasing the joy and what feels
Absolutely.
good." So
Absolutely.
it is really funny, but
Yeah.
it's that choice. And you guys, you can aggressively chase the joy while still married, while
Oh,
separated.
absolutely.
Like, this is a thing that we just, my little soapbox is we forget
Mhm.
that we're supposed to chase our own joy. And when we chase our own joy, that impacts all the people around us. We bring in fresh
Absolutely.
ideas and we bring in excitement and we bring in new things.
Mhm.
But I lost it. I totally was like, oh no, I have a family, I have a relationship, I have a this is my whole world.
Mhm.
And I forgot to chase my own joy. I forgot to
Mhm.
figure out who the heck I am outside of those other titles. And then
Mhm.
divorce comes, and then you have to. Then
Yeah.
there's not a choice
Yeah.
anymore of what you need to figure out.
Absolutely.
I love that. The last thing as we near the end of our time is I just want to make mention, because Grace has been such an amazing little guide through divorce, so intuitive and inspirational, right? And aware. But I think that's another big piece, how you approached the picture story or the CVS story was you asked her, you're like, "Oh, I don't know. What does that mean to you?" And I think that when it comes to kids, we need to keep in mind that we have an adult brain that creates a lot of connections that their mind is not creating. And so you as a mom carry all this guilt that it's creating all this other big impact. And when we can, instead of trying to control, mitigate, or protect in the way of we're controlling the story, the narrative, and instead just be curious and ask them, what does that mean to you? Or, what's going on for you? And then answer their level of questions. They don't need all the details right away. They need just that little bit. And that photograph story is a prime example. They're going to see what you put the intention on. And I wasn't perfect. I don't know if you were perfect. I
No.
still cried a lot. My kid saw me
Okay.
cry. I'm sure he
Yeah.
heard me a little bit on the phone. I did
Yeah.
my best, but I
Yeah.
wasn't perfect.
Yeah.
But what he saw overall is how hard I fought to bring happiness and joy and love
Yeah.
back into our life.
Absolutely. And to build on the photo story, one thing I should say is in Grace's room, there were photos of her dad, her grandparents, her dad's parents. Like that was her room. And it was, I'm a photo person, there's photos everywhere. So she had a wall of family photos and they stayed in there. That was her room. And they stayed in there till the day we moved out of the house when she was 18. So that was kind of the other side of the taking the photos down. But one other thing that I think is really interesting and an example of us showing both the joy and showing that we're both there is we were at a parent teacher conference and
Mm.
in Grace was in sixth grade. The kids go in with a parent at her school and we sat down, we went through this hour conversation about how Grace was doing. At the end of it, the teacher looks at us, she goes, "Wait a minute, are you two divorced?" And I said, "Yeah, we've been divorced since she was in first grade." She said, "I had no idea." And I said, "Huh." I go, "Well, it didn't occur to me to walk in here and say, 'Hi, we're divorced. Can we talk about how Grace is doing in sixth grade?'" And she said, "You would be shocked." This is the teacher that said, "You would be shocked at how few parents can walk into this room and sit down with me for an hour with their child present and talk about
Mhm.
their child's education." She said, "It is very, very rare." And I looked and I said to her, I go, "That is so sad." And she goes, "It makes me so sad." And Grace is hearing all of this. But she saw that her dad and I are there.
Mm.
What's more important to parents and how their child is doing besides health, like health and how your kids are doing in school, two of the big things you're focused on. And I thought, gosh, I mean, that just so Grace saw those moments. We were always at her soccer game or her whatever school. We were sitting next to each other. And again, just to show if she looks up and she's done something great, she shouldn't have to look at two sides of an auditorium or two sides of a field to see us going, "Great job." She should look up and be like, "There they are." And those are the little moments, but the kids see it all. And by the
Yeah,
way, the kids see it all, their friends see it all, their friends' parents see it all. And I just wanted her to always know we were there for her
I love
every
that.
step of the way. And we moved her into her college dorm room together. And actually,
It
that night, I will tell you, we said to her, "Do you want to come out to dinner?" She said, "No, I'm going to go out with my friends." So my ex husband and I sat down and we toasted to launching her into the world. And we had
Mhm.
done 11 of those 18 years in separate households,
Mhm.
but we did it together.
Yeah. It's just such a beautiful example of how good it can be, because there isn't going to be anybody else who understands that child like their two biological parents. Even when you have an awesome step parent, even when that step parent really loves them, it is just ingrained
It
in the
is.
child
It is.
that you have.
Yeah.
And so to be able to sit there, and sometimes those are the moments where, I'm looking back at little photos
Yeah.
of my son and I'm like, oh, and show it to my partner and he's
Yeah.
like, dude, I do not want to look at baby pictures of your son. Right? And I'm like, I know you don't even want to look at
Yeah.
baby pictures of your kids, like you just don't really care about baby pictures, but it's a beautiful thing.
Mhm.
And that's where we shift the narrative of divorce one good story at a time. We all know that
We
things
do.
are broken about it. We know
We
things are
do.
broken about the courts. We know things are
Yep.
sad about the way that divorce happens in
Yeah.
families and why they're happening. And like,
Yeah.
how have we not been able to change that 50% ratio
I
that
know.
continues to show up?
Yeah.
Okay, but then make the commitment of like, how can I do the best that I can do?
Yeah.
How can I set those guiding points, those key values, those markers? Where do you want it to be? And then challenge yourself to take the high road, to make the choice. It might be harder in the moment,
Yeah.
but the long-term win is so amazing.
And it's so worth it. And that's the thing. I would love everyone to just know that it takes effort. And what
Yeah.
we're saying is it takes effort, but I think the effort is so worth it in the end. And to have you and your children, and in fairness, hopefully your ex-spouse, in the best possible life that you're all meant to live in whatever form that looks like and with whoever that looks like and whoever you're supposed to spend your time with. So it is possible. It takes effort, but I just hope people can see that having a good divorce is truly a feasible outcome.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sarah, for joining us today. You
Uh,
guys, all of Sarah's details, along with the links to both of her books, so The Mom's Guide to Good Divorce and The Art of the Juggling Act, bite-sized guide for working parents, because Lord knows I want to dive into that because that was hard. Whew, working parents is a hard thing.
it
And
is.
you guys, the links for both the books, Sarah's details are all in the show notes. They're also on the crazyexwivesclub.com under episodes. I want to thank you for the work you're doing. You guys check out the book if you are in that, I don't know, it's so overwhelming phase. It's going to give you a really great overview of all the things that you can start to think of. And that's it. Another great episode of the Crazy Ex-Wives Club, a podcast for women learning how to heal from their divorce. Tune in next week for more advice and tips to help you figure out life after divorce. And until then, give yourself grace, do the best you can, and know that this is all part of the process.